Alright, so here goes the president guide for James Monroe, our fifth president. Again, Secretary of State, former Secretary of State. Again, the fourth now president from Virginia. Alright, so we've got a couple trends going on early on in our country. Virginia has got the clout. They've got power to spare. So Monroe, he's coming into the presidency right after James Madison. He had been James Madison's Secretary of State, and he's continuing on with the Democrat-Republican dynasty. 1816 is the year in which the Federalist Party is essentially going to cease to exist as a major thing. With James Monroe's presidential ascendancy, he also brings along a lot of Democrat-Republicans into the House. Do not deny the power of the Hartford Convention for casting the Federalist Party as traitors. So the Federalist Party has gone from being the national party with Washington, you can say Washington and Adams, to becoming a regional party by the time Madison's elected the first time. So now they are essentially done. They will die out during Monroe's presidency. So let's take a look at America at the time. We've got this era of good feelings where we only have one political party, bi-federalist, and the country kind of starts to unite in this idea of dual purposes. One, industrialization is going to start in earnest up north, right? The law mills, all those things start to come about up in Massachusetts, down through New Jersey and Pennsylvania. At the same time, we're also pushing further and further west. And if you take a look at the list of states that come into being during Monroe's administration, it's a pretty long list. Right? Mississippi, Illinois, Alabama, Maine, and Missouri. Right? He's got the Missouri Compromise as one of the big things that happens under his administration. So we'll take a look at this. In the Missouri Compromise, if you connect that to James Monroe, right, and take a look at that as the beginning of westward expansion. Right? All the controversy we'll talk about with moving west is going to happen under Monroe. And one of the biggest things about the Missouri Compromise, I guess we could say Louisiana is on the opposite side, on the western side of the Mississippi River, but really we're kind of considering that to be the Delta South. Right. Missouri is really the first thing of what we will know as the West. It is going to be the first state out there, more the arid West. You usually don't associate Louisiana with that. So that battlefield for what we'll have, that abolitionist battlefield, is starting to develop now as well. All right, but getting back into it, the election of 1816 is almost laughingly easy. Again, the Federalist Party is starting to die out, so James Monroe gets that win, that W, 183 electoral votes to 34 for his challenger, Rufus King. Now, over on the other side, on the election of 1820, the Federalist Party has died out, and James Monroe, being the sitting president for the Democrat-Republican Party, is really not going to have any opposition. There are going to be, I think, 3 votes sent for John Quincy Adams as Secretary of State, but they don't really amount to much. All right, so let's take a look at his domestic policies and his foreign policies. His domestic policies, or domestic issues, I guess. He's going to have the Panic of 1819 that sets in during his administration. Really the first recession in our history. A lot of people see this as kind of the first time where it really looks like we have our own economy now, separate from Great Britain. Because before this, our economic problems are laid at the feet of Britain. They're connected in some way to Britain. Usually when those recessions and panics had occurred before, it was because we had cut off trade because Britain was impressing our sailors. Britain has no blame in the Panic of 1819. It's the Bank of the United States and their policies and over-speculating and giving out loans that probably should not have been given out with people buying Western lands. And the price of those Western lands skyrockets. Everybody wants to buy it. but it creates a bubble. And when that bubble comes crashing, the economy comes crashing with it too. It's going to be short-lived, right? But it is going to be our first real recession that we cannot blame in any way on anybody else. This is ours. We have to own it. Right, the American system is also going to be policy during James Monroe's administration, proposed by Henry Clay. There's 3 parts to it. Right, tariff, protective tariff, continuation from that tariff of 1816. The Bank of the United States, and giving it more power and kind of just letting it flex its muscles a little bit more with trying to control inflation, control the economy. And then the third thing is the infrastructure, the internal improvements that are going to start to be developed. Now, James Monroe is going to fight back against that a little bit with the Cumberland Road. He's going to oppose federal money given to upkeep of this road. It's already been built, but we're trying to make sure that it stays usable. But he's going to oppose that. Another domestic issue, policy compromise success, I guess you could call it. Other people call it a complete and utter failure later. But that's kind of looking into the future, is the Missouri Compromise. So remember, we're trying to balance. We've covered this in class. We were trying to balance slave and free states. And we got to a point where we couldn't. So we had to figure out, how are we going to get Missouri into the Union? So we crafted this compromise with Maine coming into the Union as a free state, Missouri coming in as a slave state to balance it off. And then we're going to draw that 3630 line across the rest of Louisiana Purchase to divide north from south, free states from slave states, or territory. We'll see how that goes. Spoiler alert, not really well, but that he doesn't know about it. I mean, nobody at the time knows about it. They are lauding this as the compromise that has saved the Union, that has brought Missouri in, and has created a logical policy forward for our great American divisive issue. All right. So foreign policy, he's got a lot of it in there. Some of it is small fry, but this is the first real doctrine in our history that's really going to have extended consequences very, very far off into the future. So the Anglo-American Convention of 1818, you remember that's going to basically work out that northern border of our Louisiana Purchase. We give up some land, Britain gives up some land. We all call it even in the end. Oregon country is a whole other issue. So with the Anglo-American Convention, we decided to share it for 10 years. It doesn't matter who owns it. You can fly a British flag, you can fly American flag, you can fly both. You can do whatever you want to out there. We're not going to really push this issue for 10 years. And it really has to deal with that Seattle-Vancouver portion of the Oregon country. First Seminole War, the United States government is going to have to just take issue with the Seminole tribe. Seminole tribe, right around that border with Georgia and Florida, they've been inviting or encouraging runaways to leave Georgia, leave the plantation as Georgia, and join them in Florida, where they have a base of operations, where their ancestral homelands are, where they have, basically they can just sneak off into the swamps. So James Monroe's administration is going to send Andrew Jackson after the Seminole, and basically invading Spain. But it's not really going to cause an issue as long as they don't attack Spanish post forts. He does. We've got a problem. We should probably apologize, but John Quincy Adams is going to push our advantages, since Spain is really distracted by all these different revolutions, rebellions, independence movements in South America and Central America. So he actually is going to get us the Adams-Unice Treaty, where we're going to get Florida in exchange for $5 million and solidifying some of our claims in the West. We're going to give up some of the territory that we claim to allow Spain to have their Tejas region, later will become Texas, shored up. In the end, we're going to get that too. So, yeah. But that's the big thing, is we're going to get Florida during James Monroe's administration. All right, so the big one, and that's why it's underlined here. Pay attention to the underline. The Monroe Doctrine is the thing for James Monroe. It carries his name. This is the United States venturing out into foreign politics for really the first time. If you think about our politics and with other countries up to this point, it's been very reactive. Something's happening in France and we have to respond. Britain's impressing our sailors, we have to respond. The Barbary pirates are messing with us, we have to respond. This is more proactive. So the context of the Monroe Doctrine, again, we've been over it in class, so I'm not going to rehash everything, but remember that there's a lot of, one, Russian influence from Alaska. We're trying to stop that. But also a lot of these colonies are starting to break off and splinter away from their colonial regimes in South America and Central America. We want to protect them because we'd rather have independent countries like ourselves committed to democracy than these European monarchies and dictatorships being our next door neighbors. We want to have an area of influence over these territories. And if they are out of that colonial realm, there's going to be more free trade in which our merchants can probably win that contest. Right, so Monroe Doctrine is something completely different. Monroe Doctrine here is that we pledge that we will not get involved in European conflicts. We will not venture, we will not put American boots on the soil in Europe if they respect the independence of all North American and South American independent countries, independent nations. If you have colonies there, you get to keep those colonies, but you cannot reclaim any lost territory. We will protect those territories from being reconquered by European monarchies, dictatorships, autocracies, whatever you want to call it. The bold move, remember, this really isn't going to be respected unless Britain buys into the system. They do, because they want the free trade with all these Spanish territories that are now becoming independent countries. So it all works out. Monroe Doctrine will be modified by future presidents, and we'll see that, how future presidents modify the Monroe Doctrine. It's still kind of in effect today. The Russo-American Treaty is the last thing we'll take a look at here for James Monroe. Is basically we're setting that northern border of our Oregon country at 5440 north latitude. Now we don't have it today, but it's basically setting the southern boundary of Alaska. We will get Alaska later. So that is setting that southern boundary of Alaska, and we're trying to fight off this Russian influence in the west. We still have to worry about Britain. We still have to worry about Spain. But now we don't really have to worry about Russia pushing down and messing with our claims anymore. All right, so James Monroe is going to be the last president, the only real president of the era of good feelings, and the last real Democrat Republican, if I can spell Republican up here, just noticed that, forgive me, president, because of all the controversy with the 1824 election, which we'll get into next time when we take a look at John Quincy Adams.